Welcome to another episode of Dear Parents. Today, I get to talk with Dr. Kristen Pfeil. She is an occupational therapist here just across town from me, and we've had a lot of patients that we've got to work together to take care of. And we're going to be talking about sensory processing and what that actually looks like, because a lot of people hear about sensory processing or primitive reflexes or regulation, but it's often unclear exactly what that means or how we can approach it, what you see when a child is having difficulty with sensory seeking or sensory avoiding. And so hopefully this conversation helps you to get a better understanding of how this could be playing a role in your child or things that you can do proactively to help to meet those sensory needs that every child has. If you have questions, if you have topic ideas, if you have other things that you would like to know more about, check out my Substack, dearparents.substack.com, where you can get your questions asked and answered, and you can learn more about the parenting and pediatric topics that are on the minds of today's parents. Today, I get to talk with Dr. Kristen Pfeil from Connect Pediatric Therapy. She is an occupational therapist, and I'm really excited to get to chat with her, because I find myself in the past few years of finding reasons to send more and more patients to occupational therapy. And today, her and I are going to talk specifically about the young children that are dysregulated. And one of the things in particular that I want to talk about and get a better understanding of for myself as a pediatrician, but also for parents, is what sensory processing is and what it looks like when we're having difficulties with sensory processing. Kristen, can we just start and talk in the big picture about what sensory processing looks like when it's functioning well and when it's not functioning well?
Yeah. So first, we have to learn that we actually have 8 sensory systems, not just 5. So we all know about those 5 that we learned in elementary school: sight, sound, touch, hearing, and taste. We actually have 3 more that are considered more of our internal senses that are so impactful. So that we have our vestibular system, which is our sense of movement and balance. We have our proprioceptive system, which tells us, it lives in our muscles and joints. It tells us how much force to use. It gives us so much information about where our body is, our body awareness. And then that 8th one is our interoceptive sense, which is our inside body feeling. So it's the feedback that we get to our own body or from our own bodies. So if we're thirsty, we know that when our throat is feeling a little scratchy, we might be thirsty. When my bottom feels like that, it means I have to poop. So it's all those senses, that the things that only I can feel in my own body is our interoceptive sense. And what we're finding, I've been in OT for almost 25 years. And what I'm finding is that sensory system is so tied up with our regulation and our emotion, because we feel our emotions in our body. And so when my tummy feels like this, what we have to learn is, am I nervous? Do I have to go to the bathroom? Am I hungry? So if we can, one of the things I've started doing, even with littles who are like 3, is we start to learn to pay attention to our body. And when my body feels like this, it means that I might be feeling way. If I'm feeling my butterflies in my tummy and my heart's beating fast, I might be feeling nervous about that new food that mom and dad put on my plate.
Sure.
So that's where I always like to start with everybody, is let's understand about our 8 senses. And really, our sensory systems serve as the base of the pyramid that all our other skills are on. So and our sensory systems feed our brain about the world around us. So that's really what sensory processing means, is taking in that information we get through all of our senses and making sense of it. And then that integration of all of that information gives us our awareness of the world. Does that?
Yeah, that makes total sense. And that is really helpful to me to hear, just taking the 5 senses that everyone is aware of. but then adding those three other ones that often aren't thought of or well understood to most medical people, to be honest with you, or to parents out there, that there's these other senses that come into play. And if my child is constantly facing, I don't know, some random sort of other sense, if it's super loud all of the time around me, I'm going to have a hard time coping with that. And so that makes sense to me of, okay, if it's super loud all the time, I'm going to have a hard time coping. But I might not be realizing that there's these other senses that need to be put into alignment. It can't be super quiet. It can't be super loud. It has to be just right. And I have to be able to adjust my sensations when it comes to sound, as an example. But these other systems that really come into play that you don't think about that make a big difference when it comes to being regulated as a child.
Right.
Is that am I understanding that right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's also important when I help parents understand is we all live on this continuum of sensory processing. And really, we get into that sensory modulation piece of, am I seeking it? Am I avoiding
Mm,
it? Am I sensitive? So being aware of our own sensory needs as a parent is so important. And that's come up multiple times in kiddos where parents will bring them in and say, this kid is crazy all the time.
right.
But then when I get to talking to mom and dad, we find out this child is a sensory seeker, but this parent is very sensory sensitive. So they're constantly
Mm,
letting up. The child wants more from the parent and the parent needs less, or vice versa.
totally. So then you get that disconnect that makes everybody
Yes.
more frustrated, and it makes it
Right.
more dysregulating for both the child who wants the input and the parent who's like, please give me just a little
Please.
bit of space and
Yes.
quiet.
And right. And think about how that affects that connection between that parent and that child. I've had multiple parents in tears, like, I feel like I'm yelling all the time. I just want to love my child, but they drive me crazy. And so that
Hmm.
parent child dyad is not connecting in a way that feels good. So if we can help the child get their sensory needs met, because our nervous system innately seeks out what it needs. So
Sure.
if my body's wired for movement, I'm a kid that's bouncing off the walls. I'm going to find what I need, but then I'm really overwhelming my parent who's sensory sensitive, if that makes
Totally.
sense. So that's, I mean, the beauty, our practice is very family centered where parents are part of the session. And it's for that reason, because we really need to look bigger than the child. How is this child living within that family?
Well, and I'm sure that often comes into play too when it comes to the strategies and approaches that you're taking, that it's not like something where it's not like a tennis lesson. I go take a tennis lesson, but then I don't really apply that in the real world outside of the being on the tennis court or something along those lines. These are things that they're learning in their therapy session, but then they're going the rest of the time and they're just as applicable or even more applicable in the home, in the school, in the daycare, wherever they're at.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's so much, we make progress so much faster when we have the parents there because they're the ones that live with the child and they're the
Right.
ones that need to implement these strategies. So,
Now, when we're talking about two words that you mentioned there that I want to understand a little bit more,
yeah.
it sounds like there's children that are more sensory seeking.
Mhm.
And then the term that I've heard, which may be incorrect, is the more that are sensory avoidant or sensory sensitive, I guess is the way that you describe that. Is that something that varies by sense, varies by context? Like if I'm trying to put my child into the category, lumping them into sensory seeking versus sensory avoidant, is that appropriate or does it vary by senses or how should I think about that?
Yeah, that's such a good question. So it can vary. And so you might find, and that's an important tool that we use, something called a sensory profile, and it's a parent
Hmm.
questionnaire. And what it helps us determine is we may have a child that is sensory sensitive to auditory input, meaning it takes, if we visualize what I need as a cup, their cup is really small. It takes a little bit of input and the cup is overflowing. So we're talking about auditory. Maybe I'm sensory sensitive to auditory, but gosh, I'm a sensory seeker to movement. So my cup for movement is like the big gulp cup where I need more and more till it's full.
Got it.
That makes sensory this confusing when we talk about we can't just be a sensory seeker.
Right.
To back that up, there are some kids who are just sensory sensitive to a lot of sensory inputs. They're not seeking anything.
Got it.
Some kids, they're both. And there's some kids that are just seeking, seeking, seeking. What I find most of the time with my seekers is I'm an oral sensory seeker. So kids that
Okay.
like have to have something in their movement seekers. That's a more common one to see. Proprioception, that one I was talking about, is this magical sense where if we can get a child to engage in proprioception, it actually calms and regulates their nervous system, usually. So we don't really see, I wouldn't classify people as proprioceptive seekers. I feel like
Got it.
if that, yeah,
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I think that if you're looking at the big picture, it's not like you're all one or all the other.
absolutely
And
not.
some
Yeah.
of them are just more, okay, if we get more of this, then things go more smoothly, like the proprioception is what it sounds like.
Yeah. And yeah, proprioception I call our magical sense. But there's also our touch seekers, kids that want to like touch. It's like I have to explore the world through my hands.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not trying. I think what I hear so many times is that I think a lot of sensory seeking gets mistaken as just behavior.
Yes, totally.
It's not, but when we boil it down, it's a child who's trying to get their sensory needs met. And so for me, I'm a touch seeker, not me personally, but like if I'm a child that's a touch seeker, then I'm going to be touching the person next to me at circle
Right.
time. And I'm going to be, ooh, I wonder what their crown feels like. And I wonder what their shirt feels like. But to an outside observer, it looks like this kid that just won't leave everybody else alone.
Right. Can't
Doesn't
get their hands
listen.
to themselves.
Yeah. So I think that's a big question that a lot of people that I hear a lot is a sensory, is a behavior. And a lot of times something that starts out as a sensory need can turn into a behavior because but sometimes it's both. A lot of
Right.
times it's sensory. A lot of times, we get a lot of kids that have been kicked out of daycares.
That's what I think I texted you originally about when
Yeah.
we were arranging this and I'm seeing so many children in the past 5 years, maybe a little bit before COVID, but definitely since COVID, that the number of kids that I'm seeing in practice that are getting kicked out of daycares has just gone up exponentially
Yeah.
compared to where it was. And I guess I try and think about that from well, why is this happening? And I do end up seeing a lot that, okay, as we talk through, they're really sensory seeking or they're sensory avoidant or sensitive. But can you explain a little bit more or go into a little bit more depth about how those sensory mismatches lead to the behaviors, lead to the getting kicked out of
Yeah.
daycare?
Yeah. So let's think about a kiddo that's sensory sensitive. I'm a 2-year-old who's sensory sensitive, and now I'm in a 2-year-old classroom with, say, 15 other 2-year-olds. And we imagine the sensory environment of that. 2-year-olds bump into each other. They take each other's toys, loud. So if I'm a sensory sensitive kid, then I'm going to get overwhelmed pretty fast. And overwhelm means fight or flight.
For sure.
Self-preservation is lash out, right? Because that's what fight or flight looks like. And so if I'm 2 and I'm trying to hold it together, but this kid just took my toy, and then that kid over there started squealing, and then somebody bumped into me. Yeah. And that looks like a behavior.
For
What
sure.
it is an overloaded nervous system. So much of figuring out that sensory versus behavior is skilled observation of looking at what happened before we saw that behavior. Is there consistency in, wow, every day in math, that kid is struggling. But what we found out is he's been sitting for 2 hours already. And this is a kid that needs to move. So
Right.
if I give him a drink break and he gets to go run and get a drink and he takes this thing to the office for me, he came back and he sat through math. But before, he was breaking pencils and fidgeting in his chair and like they look like negative behaviors, but it's a nervous system that isn't getting its needs met. And I'm trying to do what I can, and then I can't, and it comes
To
out as
hold it together. For sure. I mean, I think it sounds like when we're trying to figure out these kids and figure out how to support them, it takes a lot of detective work because it sounds like you have to figure out what was right before the behavior and how that helped them to meet their needs once the behavior showed up.
right. So I think that's the sensory versus behavior. It's not a clear cut thing. Like you couldn't say, okay, I have this kid who does this. Well, okay, I would want to observe said child for 30 minutes and
Right.
see how are they interacting with their environment? What's their response when the light gets flipped on? What's their response to this? And did you notice when that happened? So I think detective work is a really good way to put it because it really is that observation and then talking to caregivers. Like, what is the patterns that you're seeing? There's so much, like, these preschool teachers are pretty intuitive if they're
Mm-hmm.
good at their job about, like, I was just at a daycare last week. They're like, I think this child has really poor body awareness, but I don't know. And when I watched, he uses way too much force with kids. He bumps into things. The teacher was spot on.
Yeah.
So, and parents know they're pretty intuitive too. So a lot of times I feel like it's good. I do a lot of validating too. Like you're absolutely right.
So then let's take that child that you just were talking about there with poor body awareness. I assume that they're bumping into other people, they're just in other people's bubbles, and that's leading to that fight or flight and everything along those lines. What does it look like when they're doing therapy to get better awareness and improve that? And then how does that translate into the day-to-day life
Uh,
in school for that child?
so therapy, we're using a lot. So that proprioceptive sense, I said our
Mhm.
proprioceptors are really our muscles and joints. So we're doing a lot of that heavy work and helping them gain awareness. But the power of change, like I said, is giving those parents some very specific things to do for that next week. Like I want
Hmm.
you to work on animal walks, and we're going to talk about how do your legs feel? How do your arms feel? Do you feel that in your shoulders? And we're bringing awareness to their body. Whereas before they had felt like they're ahead. And
Hmm.
I know I have arms and legs. I don't know what they're doing. I don't know where they are.
Right.
But if I can get heavy work, if lots of proprioception and feed all those muscles and joints, there's going to be increased awareness there.
How does that work at the more like brain level when it comes to like what are we seeing change as we practice with heavy work
Yeah.
or other things? I see like balancing on things and everything along those lines. Like how does that teach them what their body should feel like, or does it give them that input that they're desiring so that then they can go do the thing that they need to do, or how does all of that work?
So I think when we're talking about the proprioception of this kiddo with poor body awareness, we're really laying down your pathways about like gaining that awareness where we've had no awareness. So that would be called
Hmm.
like low registration, so to speak, of sensory input, where there's just such a I not low threshold because that implies that we can get it pretty quickly. So it's like this high threshold for sensory
Got
input.
it.
So when we're doing heavy work, we're really trying to feed that nervous system and give it information about the body. If we're talking about on the flip side, a child that is very sensory sensitive, we're doing more slow graded introduction of that input. So, for example, I have a 3 year old I saw this morning that's a very picky eater, but he's
Hmm.
also very tactily defensive, meaning he doesn't like to touch things. And so, as you can imagine, if you don't want to touch something, you can't get it to your mouth unless you're using a spoon. But our
Right.
sense of touch also extends into our mouth. So,
Mm.
I tell parents if they're not going to touch it, they're not going to put it in their mouth because our mouth is actually our tongue is highly innervated with these touch receptors. So, for him, we're doing lots of graded introduction of messy play. So like we made mashed potatoes and we hit dinosaurs in it. So he's pulling
Hmm.
them out by his fingertips. And then by the end, he would use a couple more fingers. But
Okay.
underlying all of that is regulation. We have to feel safe. So I think that's sensory regulation and sensory processing go hand in hand. I'm always, when I'm working on sensory processing with a child, we're also needing to work on that regulation piece of like helping them feel calm in their own body. So,
Gotcha. Okay. That
yeah,
makes total sense. I think that
yeah.
that helps. And it sounds like it creates those pathways or practices that then will extend to other things as well. And so it sounds like in the big picture, you keep them regulated while expanding their ability to either understand their body or to tolerate things that they weren't tolerating before. Is that a big picture?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so we do a lot of seating therapy. So we start
Hmm.
with our first 10 to 15 minutes is just play in the sensory zones. I want kiddos to seek out what they need. And if they're more of those sensory sensitive kiddos, then we're going to start exploring with our body. Maybe we start like today with the kiddo I was talking about, we started with tracing numbers that were textured. So we're not
Mm,
doing texture that's going to stick to me, but we're starting already. As soon as he got there, we're starting to touch things.
sure.
We progress to the kitchen where we are doing more of that messy food play. And so much of feeding is one of those activities where we are using all eight sensory systems. And so I think that so many of the kids that I see for feeding, it's sensory based. It's
Hmm.
one of my sensory systems is not working how it needs to. So I can't eat because to successfully eat, stay calm, I really need all eight of my sensory systems to take in that information and integrate it and for me to stay calm about it. So if I'm a movement seeker, I'm going to have a hard time sitting at the table. If I'm tactily
Hmm.
defensive, I'm going to have a hard time. If I'm oral sensory sensitive, I have a hard time. Or conversely, oral sensory under responsive, then food just really, I mean, so much of eating is motivated by how it tastes. It tastes good.
Right.
If my oral sensory system is just really not responding that much unless I have these highly spicy foods, I'm just really not that interested in eating because it's just really not that much fun.
Schedules are crazy and it can feel like a lot to try and hold all of that either on your phone or in your mind when it comes to where all the kids are moving every day and all the different pieces, especially as summer approaches and summer camps and all the different things that are going on. It is so nice to have a source of truth that lives somewhere in your house that everybody can look and see. And that is why we love our Skylight calendar. Everybody can look at it and see exactly what is going on, who's moving where, who's doing what. And honestly, it's one of our favorite things because not only is it the calendar, but it also plays a slideshow of our favorite pictures. So throughout the day, we can look over it and have a memory jogged of a nice moment. And also, keep the kids' chores on there, keep the calendar on there so everybody knows what's going on, who's going where. Check out the link in the show notes and use code Dr. Boucher, DRBOUCHER, at checkout to save 15%. Okay. I think I have a better sense now of what that looks like from a sensory seeking, sensory avoidant perspective. And I guess in the big picture, one of the words that we've been using a lot today is regulation. And I think that it would be helpful for parents to understand a little bit more about what a regulated child looks like. And obviously
Sure.
that changes as they grow
Yeah.
and all those sorts of
Yeah.
things. But how do I know if my child is regulated or dysregulated? And where do I go from there once I've decided, okay, in this moment they're dysregulated versus in this moment they seem rather regulated?
So regulated is when we have that sense of calm and connection. And so if your
Okay.
child, you've got that great eye contact. If your child is someone that uses eye contact, for some kids that's really hard, and that's so their signs of regulation look a little bit different. but it's some of those physiological things. You're like, my muscles are relaxed. I'm not like all tensed up. My color is good. It's that my tone of voice. A lot of times we can tell regulation by how loud. If a child is yelling or they're using a really loud, they could be super excited and be dysregulated, but the volume of their voice can be a nice little way to decide, is my child, how is my body moving? Am I comfortable in my own body? Am I running around? Am I turtling inside my body?
Right.
That's a sign I'm starting to get overwhelmed. If I'm starting to shut down and turtle inside myself.
And from the parent perspective, okay, I'm noticing that my child is doing those things. Do you have any big principles when it comes to how to approach a dysregulated child that you fall back on for parents that are in the midst of it, being like, okay, I see that things are going south.
Yeah.
Where should I go?
I I think we have to remember everybody's different. So if you and I may want to do different things when we're dysregulated. Some people want to stay and solve it, and some people need 5 minutes alone to collect ourselves. So I think as a parent, you figure out, does my child in that moment need a deep hug, or do they need me to help them get to their room
Hmm.
and be by themselves? And so those are conversations that we start about, do you want mommy to help you when you're mad, or do you want mommy to leave you alone? And kids are pretty articulate about, I want them to go away, or I want
Right.
mommy there, but I don't want her to touch me. We still want that connection with mommy, but I don't want to be touched in that moment. I will come find her when I'm ready for a hug. So there's not like this hard and fast way.
Sure.
You need to, I think parents, again, how I said, parents are pretty intuitive, but that is a surprise to some parents if I say, you may want to try just carrying them to their room and say,
Hmm.
I love you. I will be outside the door when you are calm, because that's what that child needs.
Sure.
Or you just sit in the corner and you're still there, and you can remind them, mommy loves you. Come over here when you're ready. We have to
Right.
honor what that child needs.
Well, I think that's so different too. And I think one of the things that I try and impress upon parents is like, it's okay to talk about things when we're not in the heat of the
Yes.
moment. Because if
Yes.
we can talk through that, if our kid is old enough that we can have those conversations and be like, hey, remember when you get upset, or remember yesterday when you were upset? And when you get upset, do you feel this way or this way? Would it be more helpful if I do this or that? I think parents are often reluctant to bring it back up as if that
Yeah. That was,
is going to re-spark it, and it's better to just, we're not in the moment of it, let's not even pretend it happened. But I think that if they can do that and say, hey, I bet you'll get upset again in the next week or two because you get upset every single day, so maybe we could come up with some plans together for when you get upset.
yes, I love that so much. I think that reflection piece is so important, because there's so much gained. Because to your point, like, let's talk about it when they're calm and regulated. And the child, even by 3, kids can identify what they need. So yes, I wholeheartedly agree that reflection after, because so many parents want to intervene during that red zone mad time.
For
That's not
sure.
the time to talk to your child. Wait till they have calmed down and you have calmed down. We do a lot of teaching with parents about co-regulation. Like, you need to be aware of your own regulation state, because if you're dysregulated up here, you're not going to parent your child well.
Totally. Yep. And I think that's really hard for parents, especially parents are all overwhelmed and all of those sorts of things. But I also think that parents have often unreasonable demands that their child holds it together
Yeah.
and speaks nicely and kindly and says please and expresses enough gratitude at all times. And if parents notice in themselves that we're not always equipped to do those things, then it makes it easier to give grace to your 4-year-old or 6-year-old or 14-year-old, that maybe there's times when they're just not capable of that,
Mhm.
in the same way that I'm not always capable as being as nice and kind as I could or should be.
Yes. Yeah, I encourage parents to do a lot of modeling if they're starting to feel dysregulated, identifying that, saying,
Hmm.
dad is getting really frustrated. Dad is going to go, I'm going to go take a 5-minute break so I can calm down, and then I'll be back. So we
Yep.
can teach kids that, like, going to your room to calm down or going to another space It's not bad. It's actually a necessary thing. We all are going to have to take breaks sometimes. I think it helps parents to realize it's okay for you to be frustrated. So do what you need to do to take care of you so that you can better take care of that child.
Totally. Because then your child will learn, hey, my parent was upset. They told me they were upset. They're not leaving, but they did go walk around the driveway or
Yeah.
something along those lines.
Yeah.
And then they
Yeah.
came back and they were more pleasant. Hey, there must be
Right.
something to that.
Yes. Maybe I'll try it.
Maybe
Yeah.
I'll try that. Can we shift gears for a couple minutes and talk about a couple of specific parenting issues that came up when I had posted about this on Instagram,
course.
and then talking with other parents, just like, oh, can you ask Dr. Kristen about this? One scenario that we see frequently is kids that really struggle with transitions. And it's different for every age and stage, of course. But I'm thinking in general about going, let's take the under 5 crowd
Yeah.
that's going from a preferred activity to a non-preferred activity. And that is a source of stress for parents. So much so that sometimes they'll try and avoid it, or they're watching Bluey and then it's time to go. So they slip the iPad in front of them so that they don't even notice that we've shifted screens. And obviously there's a better approach than that. How do you approach transitions when it becomes a source of dysregulation, frustration, big feelings for both child and parent?
Yeah, I like having really clear expectations from the start. And so the little guy I saw right before I jumped on here struggles a lot with transition. So we used a little sand timer. I hadn't tried that with him, but we tried it today. And I said, okay, so I know you want to swing, but we're going to work on this puzzle too. So how about we use the timer, and soon as the timer's up, we're going to go to do our puzzle. And then we'll use that same timer. And when the timer's up, we'll go back to the swings. And it was like a light switch because he all of a sudden felt he knew the expectation, but he also felt
Right.
how it like, I'm the one turning over the timer. Oh, Dr. Kristen, he even told me the timer's done. I need to get off the swing. And before that, it was like screaming about getting off the swing.
Yeah.
I think so
Totally.
much, if we can give children the sense of power, I do a lot of choice making. Do you want to be done with the swing in 10 seconds or 15 seconds? So again, they feel like they made the choice and it really doesn't matter which one they choose. They're going to get off the swing. So I tell parents, like, try to think about if you can give them two choices. Are you going to wear the red shirt or the blue shirt? I know you don't want to get dressed, but let's decide. You get to decide today. Are you going to wear the red shirt or the blue shirt? Or we need to go to the grocery store. Do you want to bring this toy with you or this toy with you? So it's a lot about giving children that implied sense of control. That's what so many kids in that under 5 want. I feel like my whole life, I don't get to decide. So give me control of something.
Yeah, I think that's really powerful when it comes to moving from a preferred activity to a non-preferred activity, is to not feel dragged along, but to come alongside them and shepherd them.
Yeah.
And it feels a lot more gentle when you can give them some choices and allow them to have some agency in the decisions that are totally meaningless, the red shirt or blue shirt, 10 or 15 seconds, those sorts of things. To whoa, let's let her pick. It's her turn to choose. You pick. That can make a big difference. What about when kids are really just in the midst of a meltdown in public? Because I think this is a place where the best intentions often go out the window because we're embarrassed. It's at church or at a family get together or a restaurant or a grocery store. How do you help parents to navigate that? We're halfway done grocery shopping and our child is losing it. What's the plan?
I'm thinking about what I did. I had a 3-year-old and infant twins, and that came up. The 3-year-old wanted something at Target, and we're in the middle of grocery shopping. I left the cart. I would take it to a Target person and say, I'm sorry, we have to go. And yeah, that's super embarrassing, but it also taught my daughter, she didn't have power in that situation. Like, I said no, and I meant no. And if you can't follow through on that, then I guess we're going to go. And I would tell her that we're not getting a toy today. If you continue to, I simplified it, of course, but if you continue to yell, that means we need to go. And so I think we have to, as parents, decide what is more important in that situation? And for me, it was just, yep, I needed those groceries, but I knew I was going to create a beast if I
Right.
said no and then gave it to her anyway. It
Right.
no
I think
longer
the F word there is fine. That
Yes.
we just gave in because we were under duress and had to then just, and then it teaches, okay, this is the play right here.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah. And I think sometimes I've had parents that will incentivize, like if we can get all the way through the
Mhm.
grocery store, then you get to pick out one thing. If we can't, then no one thing. So it's that more delayed gratification about
right.
it. We'll go get ice cream. If you can get through the whole grocery store and help mom get the groceries, we'll go get an ice cream. Sometimes that helps. But I think so many kids just need to know what are the expectations of me. And so in the car, you say, this is what we're going to do. We're going to grocery shop. You're going to stay in the cart. When we're done, we'll go get ice cream if we can stay in the cart the whole time. So I think the parent embarrassment, I did the long pause because I'm like, hey, I felt that. And at
Totally.
church, there were a lot of times they start crying. I scoop them up and we walk out.
Right.
The family gathering, you scoop them up and you walk out. You have to get over your own ego as a parent, I think.
Well, I think that there's too much tied up in like the perfectly proper child that says please and thank you and sits quietly
Right.
until they're called upon, that is an unrealistic expectation of the child. And so we as parents should own that, like, okay, I have done the best that I can, but my child still might have a meltdown because they're 3. And instead of making them feel bad or shaming or guilting them, I'm just
Yeah.
going to take that on myself and I'm going
Right.
to exit the situation. And maybe we'll come back and maybe we won't. And if people decide that I'm a good or bad parent because of that, then I have no control over what even I think, let alone what other people think about me. And so I'm going to move on from that. That's been a good lesson for us, especially amongst our kids with church in particular, as one. Like, this isn't a battle we're going to fight. I'd rather have a pleasant experience in the back rather than trying to get them to be quiet or bribing them with donuts
Right.
afterwards or
Absolutely.
taking away donuts. Like, none of that works, nor does it
Yes.
feel good. And at the
Yes.
bottom line, it just doesn't work. And so let's figure out
Absolutely.
something else.
Yeah. Now that I'm on the other side, I now have 3 teenagers. I've made it a point if I see parents struggling, but they're holding the boundary, I'll say something. You, it's been a hard day, but you are rocking it as a parent or saying something to validate that
Totally.
parent. You are doing an amazing job. Because as a parent, like you just feel like, oh my gosh. So I think I've tried to go above and beyond to validate these parents that are trying to toe the line and hold kids, teach kids some of these things. So yeah.
Do you think, this made me think about one more thing, and then I know that you have to get going, but one specific area where I find that parents really struggle is in the setting of the boundaries.
Yeah.
And this often comes up because parents didn't read the books, but saw the gentle parenting message and said, okay, gentle parenting means no demands, and my child is right. And if I put up any boundaries, I'm being authoritarian. And I think, at least what I see in practice, is that the kids then don't know or have any idea what the expectation should be of them. And then that leads to the big behaviors because they're without any sort of fences. How do you see that play out in practice? And do you have any ways that you teach parents how to put those boundaries back in place if they've been too permissive and it's caused a lot
Yeah.
of behavioral challenges?
Yeah. I think it is just gently helping that parent realize how boundaries actually help kids function better. It helps kids know what's coming, it gives them consistency. And so I often encourage them to pick one thing. Let's set
Hmm.
one boundary this week. What do you feel like is it bedtime? Okay. Is it mealtime? Let's pick one thing that we're going to have a boundary on and let them test it out and we definitely go through scripts that they might use
Sure.
and equip them with what to say. But I think you can't expect a family to go cold turkey from like permissive to like towing the line on everything. So
Right.
it's gentle changes. And again, helping a parent build their confidence in doing that and affirming them that this is really a great way to show your child love. You're giving them
Hmm.
consistency. So it's helping them redefine that the boundary is not a terrible thing. It's actually it's a way to love and care for your child.
Right. I use the example a lot of, so we live in the country and our dogs would run wild and put themselves at risk if we didn't put those boundaries in place of like, this is where you can roam. And within here is freedom and you can play and run and chase the ball and everything like that. But you can't go out onto the road and you can't just keep going. And it's not loving to just be like, well, my dog knows best or my child knows best. Like I'm going to be the parent that helps to create those safe boundaries that they can live comfortably within and then have freedom within those boundaries. And I think as our kids have grown, that's been something that consistently has helped us at all the ages and the stages of, yeah, kid, here's the boundaries around your phone. And we're going
Right.
to enforce these and hold these in place because we love you and we want you to be safe. And here's the freedoms you have within the boundaries. And if we keep crossing the boundaries, then we have to tighten the boundaries up until we can be trusted and safe in the space that we're given.
Yeah, we used the rope analogy. Your rope can be longer the more that you show me that you can operate within those boundaries. But
Mm-hmm.
if you show me you cannot, the rope has to get closer and you don't have as much freedom. So I think it's so important to affirm parenting is such a hard job. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that's being witness to parents and just saying, this is hard. You're doing the best you can. Let's try something a little bit different. I wonder if we try this, would this help?
Mm-hmm.
You are doing a great job. This is hard. Because I think there is like, if you live on social media, there's this image of everything can be perfect and
Right.
wonderful, flawless. And that's just not realistic with any child. So,
Totally. And then when they're not that way, it just destroys your confidence as a parent. And
yes,
you instinctively then protect yourself and blame your child or blame yourself and then you parent from a place of either my child is bad or I am bad. And then that doesn't help us to create loving, healthy relationships or connection or confidence or anything along those lines when we're coming from that place of one of us or both of us are broken.
absolutely.
Well, thank you for talking through. I know we jumped around, starting with all of the sensory seeking and sensory avoiding and talking through the senses, and then jumping into transitions and some broader parenting perspectives. If parents are saying, okay, I could use some help, I think
Yeah.
what I'm hearing today is that maybe my child has some sensory issues that I haven't understood. But what I'm hearing today makes me feel like, oh, well, maybe that's part of what I'm seeing manifest in our day to day life or their life at school. How do people reach out to you or get to work with you?
Yeah, that's a great question. The first place you can go to learn more about our clinic is our website, connectpediatrictherapy.com. The other thing you can do is give us a call, which that phone number is on the website, but we offer a free 30-minute phone call with one of our therapists, which is an excellent opportunity for parents to call in and say, no, this is what my child's doing. What do you think? Would it be helpful to do OT? And sometimes they say, why don't you just try this? And if that doesn't
Sure.
help, give us a call back. Sometimes we say, hey, I think your kiddo might benefit from an OT eval, a couple of sessions. So they can call 402-413-1356 and we can get them scheduled for a free 30-minute phone consult.
Awesome. And I'll put all that information in the show notes too, so that parents that are listening or watching can just
Yeah.
click over and get to your website or give you a call. I think it's really helpful that you offer that where they can just talk it through and
Yeah.
figure out before pulling their child out of school, getting into the clinic, those sorts of
Right.
things. Of just like, is this
Yeah.
a thing that we need to address or not? That's really generous of you to give of your time and help sort that out before parents make the trip over the time investment
Right.
and all those sorts of things.
Yes, absolutely. I want parents, it's a great chance to ask questions and it's a jumping off ground. I would much rather parents call and me say, "Hi, I think you can handle this."
Yeah.
About
But that
90%
makes
of the time, I say, "Ooh, I'm so glad you called. I think we can definitely." The earlier I will, and the earlier we intervene, the better. I see a 3-year-old with sensory processing difficulties. They turn into a 15-year-old that still has sensory processing difficulties, and that 3-year-old is a whole lot. We can lay down those new pathways a little bit quicker in a 3-year-old versus a 15-year-old who has spent 15 years.
right with those pathways and
Yes.
coping strategies and all of that.
Yep.
Well, this has been great. Oh, one last thing. Do you have any books that you really like that you often tell parents, go pick up this book or listen to this book when it comes
Yeah.
to parenting, when it comes to sensory system, when it comes to any of the things in your realm?
So my very favorite book, and it's probably 20 years old, was written by Kara Stock Kranowicz. It's called The Out of Sync Child.
Okay.
I
Yep.
think it's a great way for parents to read and they can hear their child being described, or I think that's just such a great place to start to identify, like, is my child maybe struggling with some sensory processing struggles?
I like that one too. I have that one on my Audible and I've listened to that a couple times. So
Yeah.
that's awesome. Well, thank you so much. This has been great. And I will make sure that everybody can find you and learn and get help for their kids, and appreciate your time.
Yeah. Thank you.